The bullet had torn through Isaac Bradford's shoulder, just as the sun began its descent behind the crimson mesas of eastern Arizona Territory. And now he lay face down in the dry earth, his blood mixing with the dust, while his horse galloped away into the gathering darkness. He had been riding hard from Springerville, trying to outrun the three men who had accused him of cheating at cards, which he had not done. But truth meant little when whiskey and pride were involved. His vision blurred as consciousness slipped away, and the last thing he heard was the soft padding of moccasined feet approaching through the sagebrush. When Violet Naiche found the wounded cowboy, she had been gathering herbs in the twilight, something her mother had taught her before the soldiers came and took her family to the reservation. At 22 years old, Violet had learned to move silently through the high desert, staying hidden from those who would either kill her for being Apache or drag her to San Carlos, where her spirit would die even if her body survived. She knelt beside the bleeding man, her dark eyes assessing his wounds with the practiced knowledge of someone who had seen too much violence in her young life. He was perhaps 24 or 25, with sun-darkened skin beneath the dust and blood, and though he wore the clothes of a white man, something in his face spoke of suffering she recognized. Violet looked around carefully, listening for the men who had surely done this, but heard only the evening wind moving through the juniper trees. She could leave him here to die, which would be the safest choice, but her hands were already moving to check his pulse, already calculating whether she could move him to her hidden camp before he bled out completely. The bullet had gone through cleanly, which was fortunate, but he had lost considerable blood, and the wound needed cleaning and binding if infection was not to take him within days. Making her decision, Violet gripped the cowboy under his arms and began dragging him toward a shallow wash where she had made her temporary home. He was heavy with muscle and dead weight, and by the time she had pulled him the quarter-mile to her camp, her arms trembled with exhaustion. She had chosen this place carefully, a small cave formed by overhanging rocks that could not be seen from any trail, with a spring nearby that provided fresh water. Here she had lived for 3 months, ever since escaping from the Indian agent who had tried to force himself on her when she had gone to the reservation seeking news of her younger brother. The moon rose full and bright as Violet worked through the night, first building up her small fire to heat water, then carefully cutting away the cowboy's blood-soaked shirt. The wound was ugly, the flesh torn and angry, but as she had thought, the bullet had passed through the meat of his shoulder without striking bone. She cleaned it thoroughly with water she had boiled and cooled, then packed it with a poultice made from yarrow and sage, plants that would draw out poison and promote healing. Her fingers moved with gentle efficiency as she bound his shoulder with strips torn from one of her 2 spare shirts, winding the cloth tight enough to hold the poultice in place, but not so tight as to cut off blood flow. When the wound was dressed, she turned her attention to the rest of him, checking for other injuries and finding only bruises and scrapes. She managed to get water between his lips, though he did not wake, and covered him with her single blanket before settling down to watch him through the night. Sleep was dangerous when there might be men searching, and besides, she needed to monitor his breathing to make sure fever did not set in too quickly. Isaac Bradford swam through dark dreams filled with gunfire and accusation, his father's disappointed face mixing with images of the cards falling on the table and the sudden rage in Jack Morrison's eyes. He had only been in Springerville for 2 weeks, working odd jobs and trying to save enough money to buy a small piece of land where he might start over, away from the mistakes of his past. His father had been a drunkard who beat his mother until she died of injuries, she claimed came from falling, and Isaac had left Tennessee at 16, determined never to become that kind of man. 8 years of drifting had taught him to be careful, to avoid trouble, to keep his head down and his hands honest, but somehow trouble had found him anyway. The pain came first as he clawed his way toward consciousness, a burning agony that radiated from his shoulder through his entire body. He groaned without meaning to, and immediately felt cool fingers on his forehead, heard a soft voice speaking words he did not understand. His eyes opened to see a face hovering above him, a woman's face with high cheekbones and dark eyes that watched him with cautious concern. For a moment he thought he was still dreaming, but the pain was too real, and so was the smell of wood smoke and medicinal herbs. "Easy," Violet said in English, seeing him start to move. "You are wounded. The bullet went through, but you must stay still." Isaac's throat was dry as sand, and when he tried to speak, only a croak emerged. She understood and brought a hollowed gourd filled with water to his lips, supporting his head with surprising strength as he drank. The water was cool and sweet, the best thing he had ever tasted, and he drank greedily until she pulled it away. "Not too much at once," she said. "You will be sick." His vision was clearing now, and he could see her more distinctly in the morning light that filtered into what appeared to be a cave. She was Apache, he realized, dressed in a mixture of traditional and white clothing, her long black hair braided and hanging over one shoulder. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, but more than that, she had clearly saved his life. "Thank you," he managed, his voice still rough. "Those men, they were trying to kill me." "They may still be looking," Violet replied, sitting back on her heels. "You cannot travel yet. The wound must begin to heal, or you will bleed again." Isaac tried to assess his situation, which was complicated at best. He was wounded and weak, being sheltered by an Apache woman in what was clearly a hiding place, which meant she was likely running from something or someone herself. The year was 1879, and tensions between Apache people and white settlers remained high throughout the territory, with atrocities committed on both sides and trust nearly impossible to find. Yet this woman had saved him when she could have simply let him die. "I am Isaac," he said. "Isaac Bradford, I am grateful for your help." She studied him for a long moment before responding. "Violet Naiche, you should rest now. Talking takes strength you do not have." He wanted to ask her many things, wanted to know why she was hiding, wanted to understand why she had helped him, but his body betrayed him and he felt consciousness slipping away again. The last thing he was aware of was her hand resting lightly on his uninjured shoulder, a touch that somehow made him feel safe despite everything. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and fever. Isaac drifted in and out of awareness, sometimes waking to find Violet changing his bandages, sometimes opening his eyes to see her sitting near the cave entrance, keeping watch. When the fever came hard on the second night, she stayed beside him constantly, bathing his face and chest with cool water, forcing bitter tea between his lips, speaking softly in Apache when he thrashed and cried out. He was dimly aware of the care she gave him, aware that she had seen him at his most vulnerable, had tended to his body with hands that were both gentle and impersonal. On the fourth day, the fever broke, and Isaac woke with a clearer head than he had known since being shot. The pain in his shoulder had subsided to a steady ache, and when he carefully moved his arm, he found that while it hurt, the range of motion was not completely gone. Violet was not in the cave, and for a moment panic seized him, the irrational fear that she had left him alone. But then he heard her voice outside, speaking in Apache. He pulled himself up to sitting, gritting his teeth against the dizziness, and looked around the cave properly for the first time. It was a small space, barely large enough for two people to lie down, with a fire ring near the entrance and various bundles and pouches arranged neatly against the walls. Everything was meticulously organized, he noticed, the possessions of someone who lived carefully and traveled light. Near his blanket was a small collection of items that must be his, things she had taken from his pockets and belt: a folding knife, a few coins, a battered pocket watch that had been his grandfather's. Violet appeared at the cave entrance, her arms full of green plants he could not identify. She stopped when she saw him sitting up, and something flickered across her face, relief perhaps, or satisfaction. "You are better," she said, coming inside and setting down her burden. "The fever is gone." "Thanks to you," Isaac replied. "How long have I been here?" "This is the 4th day since I found you." She knelt and began sorting through the plants, selecting certain leaves and roots. "Your wound is healing well. You were fortunate. The bullet missed the major blood vessels." Isaac watched her work, noting the efficiency of her movements, the knowledge evident in every choice she made. "You are a healer. My mother taught me." Violet's voice was neutral, but he heard the pain beneath it. "Before she died on the reservation." "I am sorry." The words felt inadequate, but he meant them. "My mother is dead too. My father killed her, though no law would say so." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared grief. "This is a hard world," she said quietly. "It is," he agreed. "Made harder by cruel people. The men who shot me, I had done nothing to them except win honestly at cards. They could not accept that luck favored someone else." Violet returned to her sorting. "Pride makes fools of men," also whiskey. Despite everything, Isaac found himself almost smiling. "You speak truth. I do not drink, which might be why I won while they lost. Their judgment was soaked in whiskey. Yet you nearly died for their foolishness." She began grinding some of the roots with a smooth stone. "When you are stronger, where will you go?" It was a fair question, one he had been avoiding thinking about. "I do not know. I was working in Springerville saving money. I wanted to find land, maybe raise horses. But those men know me there now, and they have friends. Going back might mean dying." "Running away from trouble follows you in this territory," Violet said. "I know this well." Isaac heard the story behind her words. "You are hiding too." She did not answer immediately, focusing on her grinding until the root had become a paste. Finally, she spoke. "The Indian agent at San Carlos, he thought that because I have no family left, I was his to use. When I refused him, he said I was rebellious, that I would be punished. So I left before he could make good on his threat." Anger rose in Isaac's chest, hot and fierce. "That man should be horsewhipped." "That man has the protection of the government," Violet replied bitterly. "I am only an Apache woman. Who would believe me? Who would care?" "I would believe you. I do believe you." Isaac shifted, trying to get more comfortable, and winced as his shoulder protested. "I have seen enough of the world to know that power protects itself, and the innocent suffer." Violet brought him water and the bitter tea she had been preparing. "Drink this. It will help with the pain and prevent infection." He drank obediently, suppressing a grimace at the taste. "You have kept me alive, tended wounds that would have killed me. I owe you my life, Violet Naiche." "You owe me nothing," she said. "I did what anyone should do when finding a person injured. That others would not does not make my actions special. It makes them special to me." Isaac set down the empty gourd and met her eyes. "When I am healed, I will not go where I might bring trouble back to you. I promise you that." Something softened in her expression. "Rest now. You are still weak, and talking too much will tire you." Over the following week, Isaac's strength returned gradually. Violet changed his bandages twice daily, and though he offered to do it himself, she refused, saying that he might disturb the healing tissue or fail to notice signs of infection. He tried not to think about the intimacy of her hands on his bare skin, tried not to notice how his heart beat faster when she leaned close to examine the wound. She was his healer, nothing more, and he was a burden she had taken on out of compassion. Once he was well enough to travel, she would return to her solitary existence, and he would ride away, and that was how it should be. Yet as the days passed, they began to talk more, sharing stories of their lives in the careful way of people who have learned to guard their hearts. Isaac told her about Tennessee, about fleeing his father's house and working his way west through a series of jobs, both honest and questionable. He had been a stable hand, a ranch worker, a freight guard, even briefly a deputy in a small Kansas town, until the sheriff learned he could not stomach hanging a man for stealing food to feed his children. Violet listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that revealed her sharp intelligence. In turn, she told him about growing up in the mountains, about learning to ride before she could walk properly, about her mother's gentle teaching and her father's fierce pride. Her father had been killed by soldiers when she was 15, shot down while trying to protect their winter camp. Her mother had survived only 3 years on the reservation, dying of the lung sickness that spread through the overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. Her brother, younger by 4 years, had been sent to one of the Indian schools in the East, and she had no way of knowing if he still lived or what had become of him. "His name is Joseph," she said one evening as they sat by the fire, watching stars appear in the deepening blue above. "The missionaries baptized him when he was small, before my mother understood what it meant. She always regretted it, but he wore the name proudly. He wanted to learn the white man's ways, thought it would protect us." "How old would he be now?" Isaac asked. 18 if he lives." "Old enough to be a man, but I still think of him as a boy." Her voice carried a weight of sorrow. "I think of trying to find him, but I do not even know which school they sent him to. There are so many, and they do not answer letters from Apache women." Isaac had been thinking about his own future, about what he would do when he was healed enough to ride. The idea that had been forming in his mind was crazy, probably impossible, but sitting here beside Violet in the firelight, it suddenly seemed like the only thing that made sense. "When I leave here," he said slowly, "I was thinking of heading further west, maybe into New Mexico territory. I heard there is land there, places where a man might settle without too many questions being asked. But the thing is, I am tired of being alone. I am tired of running. And I keep thinking that maybe 2 people running together would be stronger than one alone." Violet had gone very still, her face turned toward the fire so he could not read her expression. "What are you saying, Isaac Bradford?" "I am saying that you saved my life, and in doing so, you gave me reason to think about what kind of life I want to live." He took a breath, knowing he was about to step off a cliff. "I am saying that I would be honored if you would consider traveling with me as partners. I know it is improper to suggest such a thing, and I know you have no reason to trust any white man, but I swear to you I mean no dishonor. I just think that maybe we could help each other, watch each other's backs, and perhaps find a place where we could both be safe." For a long moment, Violet said nothing, and Isaac felt his heart sinking. He had overstepped, presumed too much, and now he had made everything awkward between them. But then she turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw not rejection but a cautious hope that made his breath catch. "You would travel with an Apache woman?" she asked quietly. "You know what people would say. You know the danger." "I know the danger of being alone too," Isaac replied. "I know what it is to have no one to depend on, no one who cares if you live or die. These past days, you have shown me more kindness than anyone has in years. If people want to judge that, let them." "It would be more than judgment," Violet said. "There are those who would kill us both simply for traveling together. They would call me a savage and you a traitor to your race." "My race has not done much for me lately," Isaac said, "and I would rather be a living traitor than a dead, respectable man." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the first real smile he had seen from her. "You speak foolishness, but it is honest foolishness." "I will consider what you have said." That night, as Isaac lay wrapped in his blanket with his healing shoulder aching, he stared up at the cave ceiling and wondered what he had done. He had known this woman for barely 2 weeks, knew almost nothing about her except that she was skilled and brave and alone, yet he had suggested they bind their fates together. It was madness, the kind of impulsive decision he had always avoided, yet it felt more right than anything he had done in years. What he had not said, what he barely dared admit to himself, was that somewhere in the fevered dreams and careful tending, somewhere between her stern instructions and brief smiles, he had begun to care for Violet Naiche in a way that went beyond gratitude. He found himself watching her when she was not looking, noticing the grace of her movements, the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her small frame. He wondered what it would be like to hear her laugh freely, to see her without the weight of constant vigilance. He wondered if she might ever care for him as more than a burden she had chosen to carry. Violet sat outside the cave long after Isaac had fallen asleep, wrestling with her own thoughts. She had lived alone for months now, and before that had been surrounded by people but still fundamentally solitary, her trust shattered by too much loss and betrayal. Saving the wounded cowboy had been instinct, the teaching of her mother and the basic human decency her people valued, but she had not expected to come to know him, to find herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to noticing things about him that had nothing to do with healing. She noticed how he tried to do things for himself even when it hurt, not wanting to be more trouble than necessary. She noticed the way he listened when she spoke, really listened, as though her words mattered. She noticed the sadness in his eyes when he thought she was not watching, a loneliness that mirrored her own. And she noticed, though she tried not to, how the firelight played across the planes of his face, how his hands were gentle despite their calluses, how his voice grew soft when he spoke to her. The truth was that she had been drawn to him from the moment she found him bleeding in the dust, had felt some recognition that went beyond reason. She told herself it was simply compassion, but as she nursed him through fever and watched him grow stronger, she had to admit there was more to it. He made her feel less alone, made her think that perhaps the future did not have to be an endless succession of hiding places and near escapes. But traveling together, as he suggested, would be complicated and dangerous. They would face hostility from all sides, and the practical difficulties were enormous. Yet the alternative was to heal him fully and watch him ride away, returning to her solitary existence, and the thought of that made her chest ache in a way she did not want to examine too closely. By the time the first light of dawn began to touch the eastern sky, Violet had made her decision. It was probably foolish, certainly risky, but she was tired of living in fear, tired of being alone. If Isaac Bradford was willing to face the world's judgment to travel with her, then perhaps she could be brave enough to try. Isaac woke to find Violet already up, boiling water for the morning tea. She handed him a cup without speaking, then sat down across from him with her own. He sipped the bitter brew and waited, sensing she had something to say. "I will go with you," she said finally, meeting his eyes. "When you are well enough to travel, we will go together to find this land you speak of. But we must be clear about what this means. We will be partners, equals. You will not command me or expect me to be subservient. We will make decisions together. Can you agree to this? Relief and joy flooded through Isaac, though he kept his voice steady. "I can agree to that. I would want nothing less than an equal partner. And Violet, I promise you that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, to be worthy of your trust." "Trust must be earned," she said. "But you have made a beginning. Now we must plan carefully. You cannot return to Springerville, and I cannot go to any town where the Indian agent might hear of me. We will need supplies, horses, weapons. We will need to travel carefully and avoid main roads." They spent the rest of the morning making plans, and Isaac was impressed by Violet's practical knowledge and careful thinking. She knew the land intimately, knew where water could be found and which routes were less traveled. He had some money. The coins she had saved from his pockets plus a small amount he had hidden in his boot heel. Enough to buy basic supplies if they could find a trading post or small settlement where they would not draw too much attention. "There is a place," Violet said thoughtfully, 2 days' ride west of here. "A man named Ezra Cooper runs a trading post. He is fair, asks few questions. He was married to a Navajo woman before she died, so he does not carry the same hatred as others. We might be able to get what we need there." "Then that is where we will go," Isaac agreed. "But first I need to be able to ride without falling off the horse or tearing open my wound." Over the next week, Isaac worked to rebuild his strength. Violet allowed him to do more for himself, and he began taking short walks around their hidden camp, gradually increasing the distance as his stamina returned. The wound was healing cleanly, the flesh knitting together under Violet's careful tending, and while his shoulder remained stiff and sore, he could move his arm without severe pain. They fell into an easy routine during this time, working together to maintain the camp, prepare food, and keep watch. Isaac found himself learning from her constantly, absorbing her knowledge of the desert plants and animals, her understanding of how to read the land for signs of danger or opportunity. She taught him some words in Apache, laughing at his clumsy pronunciation, and he taught her things he knew about horses and tracking from his years of ranch work. The laughter was new and precious. Isaac discovered that when Violet felt safe enough to let down her guard, she had a quick wit and a sharp sense of humor. She teased him gently about his inability to move silently through brush, about the way he made faces when drinking her medicinal teas, about his stubborn insistence on trying to do things before he was fully ready. He found himself trying to make her smile, treasuring each laugh like a rare gift. One afternoon, as they sat sorting through the supplies they would take when they left, Isaac worked up the courage to ask something that had been on his mind. "Violet, can I ask you something personal?" She glanced up from the leather pouch she was mending. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Fair enough." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "When we travel together, people will make assumptions about our relationship. Some of those assumptions will be ugly. I want you to know that I will never expect anything from you, will never assume I have any rights or claims. Your trust and your company are enough, more than enough." Violet set down her mending and regarded him seriously. "You are saying you do not want me as a woman?" "No." Isaac felt his face heat. "I mean, that is not what I am saying. I am saying that I would never force or pressure you. That I respect you too much for that. What I want does not matter as much as what is right." "And what do you want, Isaac Bradford?" Her voice was quiet, but there was something in it that made his heart beat faster. He met her eyes, deciding that after everything they had been through, she deserved honesty. "I want you to be happy and safe. I want to know you better, to hear more of your stories and your laughter. I want to be someone you can depend on, someone who makes your life easier rather than harder. And yes, if I am being completely truthful, I want more than that too. But only if you wanted it as well, only if it came freely from your heart and not from obligation or fear or gratitude. Violet was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, her words deliberate and careful. In my culture, when a man wants to court a woman, he proves himself worthy through his actions, not just his words. He shows respect to her family, demonstrates his ability to provide and protect. But I have no family left to speak for me, and you have already shown me more respect than any man has in years. You have been patient and honest, have not taken advantage of my situation or yours. I would never, Isaac said quietly. I know. I am beginning to understand that about you. She picked up the pouch again, her fingers resuming their work. I am not ready to speak of feelings or make promises about the future, but I want you to know that I do not see you as just a burden I helped out of obligation. You have become someone I value, someone whose company I enjoy. Perhaps that is enough for now. Isaac felt a smile spread across his face. That is more than enough. That is everything. 2 days later, Isaac declared himself ready to travel, and Violet did not disagree. She had been growing increasingly uneasy about staying in one place for so long, worried that someone might stumble across their camp, or that the men who had shot Isaac might still be searching the area. They packed carefully, taking only what they could carry, and Violet performed a final ceremony of sorts, thanking the land and the spring for sheltering them, asking forgiveness for any disturbance they had caused. The journey to Ezra Cooper's trading post took 3 days rather than 2, partly because they traveled cautiously, avoiding any sign of other people, and partly because Isaac still tired more easily than he would admit. Violet watched him carefully, noting when he grew pale or when his hand went unconsciously to his healing shoulder, and she called for rest stops before he had to ask. He appreciated her attention even as he chafed at his own weakness. They saw few people during the journey, just a distant wagon train one afternoon, and what might have been Apache scouts on a ridge the second morning. Violet studied the scouts for a long time through the sheltering rocks where they had taken cover, and Isaac saw something like longing cross her face. "You want to go to them?" he asked quietly. "I would understand if you did." She shook her head. "They might be from a band that is still free, or they might be reservation scouts working for the army. I cannot tell from here, and approaching strangers is dangerous even for me. Besides, I have made my choice. We go forward together." The trading post appeared suddenly. A low adobe building with a corral and a few outbuildings, situated in a valley between rust-colored hills. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Isaac could see a few horses in the corral, signs of life and commerce. They watched from a distance for a while, Violet using her sharp eyes to assess the situation. "Only one horse I do not recognize," she said finally. "The others are Cooper's stock. We should be safe enough." They approached openly, not wanting to seem like they were sneaking up, and a man emerged from the trading post before they had crossed half the distance. He was older, perhaps 50, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the desert sun. His eyes swept over them quickly, taking in their dusty clothes, Isaac's careful way of moving, the obvious fact that they were traveling light. "Ezra Cooper," he said by way of greeting, "you look like you have had a rough time." "Rough enough," Isaac agreed. "We are hoping to buy some supplies if you can spare them. We have money." Cooper's eyes settled on Violet, and she lifted her chin, meeting his gaze steadily. Something passed between them, some recognition or understanding, and the older man nodded slightly. "I reckon I can help you with that. Come inside. Get out of the sun. You look like you could use some decent food, too." The trading post was dim and cool inside, packed with goods of every description from flour and coffee to saddles and ammunition. A Navajo woman of perhaps 30 looked up from where she was folding blankets, and Cooper introduced her as Blue Sky, his helper and friend. Isaac caught the inflection and guessed there was more to their relationship than that, but it was none of his business. They spent an hour selecting supplies, with Cooper proving as fair as Violet had promised. Isaac used most of his remaining money, but came away with everything they needed for weeks of travel, including a good rifle and ammunition, cooking gear, and food stores. Cooper threw in a few extras without being asked, including a small bottle of whiskey and a wool blanket. "You two got the look of people who are running from something," Cooper said as he tallied up their purchases. "Not my place to judge or ask questions. But I will say this: head southwest if you are going into New Mexico. The land between here and Socorro is hard country, not many people, which might suit you. There are valleys in the mountains where a person could make a life if they were determined enough." "Thank you," Isaac said, meaning it deeply. "We appreciate your discretion and your help." Cooper shrugged. "My wife taught me that people are people, whatever their blood. The world would be a better place if more folks understood that. Blue Sky here has been keeping me from going crazy with loneliness since my Sarah passed. Figure I ought to pay that kindness forward when I can." As they were loading their purchases, a rider came galloping up to the trading post, a young white man with a badge pinned to his vest. Isaac's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle they had just purchased, but Violet laid a warning hand on his arm. "Ezra," the deputy called out, dismounting quickly. "Have you seen a cowboy and an Indian woman traveling together? There is a man in Springerville looking for a cowhand who ran out on a debt, and someone said they saw him with an Apache woman heading this way." Cooper came out of the trading post, his face bland and helpful. "Cannot say that I have, deputy. I have had a few customers through, but no one matching that description. Just the usual traders and ranchers." The deputy frowned, clearly frustrated. "Well, if you do see them, there is a reward. The man who is looking, Jack Morrison, he is offering $20 for information." "That is generous," Cooper said neutrally. "I will keep my eyes open. This cowhand, what did he do exactly? Cheated at cards, apparently, and when Morrison called him on it, he shot Morrison's brother and ran. Morrison wants justice." Isaac felt anger rise hot in his chest. The lie was brazen, but he forced himself to stay silent and still, letting Cooper handle it. "Well, justice is important," Cooper agreed. "Though I have known Jack Morrison for some years, and I have never known him to let truth get in the way of a grudge. But like I said, I will keep my eyes open." The deputy seemed satisfied enough with that, and rode off after accepting a canteen of water for his journey. Once he was out of sight, Cooper turned back to Isaac and Violet, his expression grim. "You two need to get moving, and not southwest like I first suggested. Too many people will be watching that direction now. Head north instead, up toward the White Mountains. There are some valleys up there where my wife's people used to camp. I can draw you a map. You can hole up for a while until this blows over." "Why are you helping us?" Isaac asked. "You do not know us. Do not know if that deputy's story is true or not." "I know Jack Morrison," Cooper said flatly. "I know he is a drunk and a bully who has gotten away with murder himself more than once because his father has money and influence. I also know the look of a decent person when I see one, and you two have it. Morrison's brother probably pulled a gun first and you defended yourself, am I right?" "Near enough," Isaac admitted. "Though I did not shoot him. I was too busy trying to get away." Cooper nodded as though that confirmed his suspicions. "Then Morrison is just looking for revenge on someone he thinks is weak enough to crush. Well, I do not help bullies, and I do not turn away people who need aid. Now let me draw that map, and you two get gone before anyone else comes looking." The map Cooper drew was detailed and precise. showing springs and landmarks, good camping spots and areas to avoid. He also gave them advice about how to approach the old Apache camps, how to read the signs that would tell them whether the area was still being used. Blue Sky packed them extra food, including some dried meat and cornmeal, and pressed a small medicine bundle into Violet's hands. "For protection," she said softly in English that carried a heavy accent. "The spirits watch over those who are brave enough to live true to their hearts." Violet accepted the gift with grave thanks, and Isaac saw tears shining in her eyes that she blinked away quickly. They left the trading post within the hour, heading north as Cooper had advised, feeling both grateful for the help and anxious about the danger they now knew was following them. As they rode through the afternoon, Isaac found himself thinking about what Blue Sky had said, about living true to their hearts. He had spent so many years just surviving, just getting from one day to the next, that he had forgotten what it meant to actually live. But these past weeks with Violet had awakened something in him, a sense that life could be more than mere endurance. He glanced over at her riding beside him, her body moving with the horse as though they were one creature, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, and felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly took his breath away. He was falling in love with her, he realized. Perhaps had already fallen. It was inconvenient and complicated and probably foolish, but it was true nonetheless. He loved her strength and her gentleness, her humor and her sorrow, the way she moved through the world with such careful grace. He loved how she had saved him without knowing him, how she challenged him to be better, how her rare smiles made his heart sing. And he knew, with a certainty that went beyond reason, that he would do anything to keep her safe, to earn a place by her side, to maybe, eventually, win her heart as she had won his. But he would not tell her, not yet. She had said she was not ready to speak of feelings, and he would respect that. He would show her through his actions, would prove himself worthy of her trust one day at a time. If she eventually came to care for him as he cared for her, it would be a gift beyond measure. If she did not, well, at least he would have the privilege of being her friend and partner. Violet felt Isaac's eyes on her and glanced over to find him watching her with an expression that made something flutter in her chest. She had seen that look before, from boys in her band when she was younger, but it had never made her feel this particular combination of fear and longing. She was not ready to name what she felt for Isaac Bradford, was not sure she could trust these new and confusing emotions, but she could not deny their existence. He had become important to her, somewhere in the days of tending his wounds and sharing stories by the fire. She found herself thinking about him constantly, worrying about his healing, planning for their future together in ways that went beyond mere survival. She noticed things that had nothing to do with whether he was a good traveling companion. The way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled, the gentleness of his hands, the sound of his voice in the darkness saying her name. She wanted to know everything about him, wanted to share with him pieces of herself she had thought were locked away forever. But love was dangerous, led to pain when the people you loved were taken away. And she had lost so many people already that she was not sure her heart could survive losing another. Better to keep some distance, to maintain the careful partnership they had negotiated, to not risk more than she could afford to lose. Even as she thought it, she knew she was lying to herself. It was already too late for caution. Her heart had already made its choice, even if her mind was still catching up. They traveled for 5 days through increasingly rugged country, climbing into the pine-covered mountains, where the air grew cooler and the landscape changed from desert to forest. Cooper's map proved accurate, leading them to springs and sheltered campsites, helping them avoid the few trails that saw regular use. They encountered no one during those days, and gradually the tension of being pursued eased, replaced by a growing sense that they might actually find the sanctuary they were seeking. On the evening of the fifth day, they reached a valley that took Isaac's breath away. It was perhaps 2 miles long and half a mile wide, nestled between forested ridges, with a clear stream running down the center and meadows of waving grass on either side. Game trails crisscrossed the area, and Isaac saw a deer watching them from the tree line. There were signs of old camps, fire rings, and the remains of brush shelters, but nothing recent. "This is it," Violet said softly, something like wonder in her voice. "This is where my people came in summer, before the soldiers drove us away. I have not seen this place since I was a child, but I remember it." "It is beautiful," Isaac agreed. "Do you think we could stay here? Make it our home?" Violet dismounted and walked slowly into the meadow, her hand trailing through the tall grass. Isaac followed, leading both horses, watching as she turned in a slow circle, tears streaming down her face. "I never thought I would see this place again," she whispered. "My father taught me to fish in that stream. My mother gathered herbs in those meadows. We were happy here before everything changed." Isaac set down the horse's reins and went to her, not touching but standing close enough that she would know he was there. "Then we will be happy here too," he said firmly. "We will build something good in this place. We will honor the memories by making new ones." She turned to look at him, her face wet with tears but also shining with something that might have been hope. "You would do this. Stay here with me, build a life in this hidden valley." "There is nowhere else I would rather be," Isaac said truthfully. "No one else I would rather be with. If you will have me, Violet Naiche, I will stay with you always." The words echoed those he had spoken in fever dreams, words she had heard but thought he would not remember. She had held them secret in her heart, turning them over like precious stones in the darkness, and now here he was offering them to her again, conscious and clear-eyed and certain. "Stay with me always," she repeated softly, testing the words. "That is a long time, Isaac Bradford. That is a promise that should not be made lightly." "I do not make it lightly," he said. "I make it knowing full well what I am saying. I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build a home with you, tend horses with you, grow old with you. I want to earn your love, if such a thing is possible, and spend every day proving myself worthy of it. I love you, Violet. I have been trying not to say it, trying to give you time, but standing here in this place that means so much to you, I cannot keep silent any longer." Violet felt her heart crack open, all the careful walls she had built crumbling in the face of his honesty and passion. She had been loved before by her parents, by her people, but never like this, never with this intensity and focus. Never by someone who looked at her and saw not just an Apache woman or a survivor or a healer, but all of who she was and who she might become. "I am afraid," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I am afraid to love you because everyone I have ever loved has been taken from me. I am afraid that if I let myself care too much, the world will find a way to steal you away." Isaac reached out slowly, giving her time to refuse, and took her hands in his. "I cannot promise that nothing will ever separate us. Life is uncertain, and death comes for everyone eventually. But I can promise that for whatever time we have, I will be yours completely. I will fight to stay by your side, will do everything in my power to build a future with you. Is that enough?" She looked down at their joined hands, his pale skin against her darker fingers, and thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The violence and loss, the chance meeting, the slow building of trust, the growing recognition that together they were stronger than either could be alone. She thought about the risk of opening her heart, weighed against the certainty that she had already given it whether she acknowledged it or not. "Yes," she said finally, looking up to meet his eyes. "It is enough. And Isaac, I need to tell you something too. I love you. I have been fighting against it, telling myself it was too soon, too dangerous, too impossible. But my heart does not care about what is wise or safe. It wants you, has chosen you, and I cannot deny that anymore." The smile that broke across Isaac's face was like sunrise, brilliant and warming. He raised her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then we will be afraid together," he said. "And we will build something beautiful anyway, something that honors everyone we have lost by proving that love is stronger than hate, that hope can survive even in darkness." Violet felt something in her chest loosen and expand, joy flooding through her like spring water. She pulled her hands free from his and reached up to frame his face, pulling him down until their lips met in a kiss that was tender and fierce all at once. Isaac's arms came around her carefully, mindful of his still healing shoulder, holding her close as though she was something precious and fragile that might disappear if he did not keep her safe. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Violet laughed out loud, a sound of pure happiness that rang through the valley. "We are crazy," she said. "Two broken people with nothing but dreams and determination." "Then we will be crazy together," Isaac agreed, grinning. "And maybe crazy is what this world needs more of." They spent the remaining daylight exploring their valley, choosing a site for their home near the stream but sheltered by pines, a spot with good drainage and protection from wind. They would need to build a cabin before winter came, would need to hunt and preserve meat, gather food stores, cut firewood. It would be hard work, but as they planned and discussed, moving easily between English and the Apache words he was learning, Isaac felt happier than he had been in his entire life. That night, they made camp under the stars, lying close together in their blankets, talking quietly until the fire burned low. Isaac told Violet about his dream of raising horses, about breeding them for intelligence and temperament rather than just speed or strength. She told him about the herbs that grew in these mountains, about the healing knowledge she wanted to preserve and perhaps someday teach to others. They made plans that stretched into the future, allowing themselves to hope, to imagine years and decades together. When Violet finally fell asleep, her head resting on Isaac's uninjured shoulder, he stayed awake a while longer, looking up at the immensity of stars overhead. He thought about the strange path that had brought him here, about the bullet that had nearly killed him, but instead had led him to the person who made his life worth living. He thought about his mother, hoping that, wherever she was, she knew he had found happiness. He thought about Violet's parents and her lost brother, hoping they would approve of him, of his love for their daughter and sister. "I will take care of her," he whispered to the stars, making a promise to the dead and to himself. "I will love her and protect her and honor her for all of my days. This I swear." A shooting star streaked across the sky, bright and brief, and Isaac chose to take it as a sign of blessing. The next weeks were filled with constant activity as they worked to establish their home before the mountain winter arrived. Isaac proved to be a skilled builder despite his healing shoulder, and under his direction, they constructed a sturdy cabin using the abundant timber from the surrounding forest. Violet chinked the gaps between logs with a mixture of mud and pine needles, making the walls tight against wind and rain. They built a stone fireplace for warmth and cooking, a project that took several days but would make all the difference when cold weather came. Between building, they hunted and foraged, with Violet teaching Isaac which plants were edible or medicinal, and Isaac bringing down deer and elk to provide meat for winter. They worked side by side from dawn until dark, their bodies growing strong with the labor, their partnership deepening with every shared task. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a particularly long day of hauling stones for the fireplace, Violet said quietly, "We should marry." Isaac looked over at her in surprise. "I have been thinking the same thing, but I did not want to presume. I know marriage in the white world has not been kind to women, giving husbands ownership of their wives. I would never want that between us. In my culture, marriage is a partnership of equals," Violet said. "A man and woman choose each other and both have rights and responsibilities. That is the kind of marriage I would want." "Then that is the kind of marriage we will have," Isaac agreed. "But how do we do this properly?" "I do not know Apache customs, and we have no preacher or witnesses out here." Violet smiled. "We need only ourselves and our promises to each other. The earth and sky will be our witnesses. Tomorrow, if you are willing, we will speak our vows and become husband and wife in the way of my people." The next day dawned clear and bright, the air crisp with the promise of approaching autumn. Violet had been up before dawn, bathing in the cold stream and putting on her best remaining clothes, a deerskin dress that her mother had made for her years ago. She had braided her hair and woven wildflowers into the plaits, and when Isaac saw her, his breath caught at her beauty. He had bathed, too, and put on the cleanest clothes he possessed, wishing he had something better to offer her on this day. But Violet seemed pleased as she led him to a spot beside the stream where sunlight filtered through the pines, and the water sang over smooth stones. "In Apache tradition," she explained, "the couple shares water from the same vessel, symbolizing that their lives will flow together from this day forward. We speak our promises to each other and to the spirits who watch over us. Then we are bound, as much as any ceremony in a church could bind us." She produced a beautiful clay bowl, one she had spent the past week making from river clay, decorated with simple but elegant designs. She filled it with clear water from the stream and held it out to him. "I am ready," Isaac said. "Tell me what I should say." "Speak from your heart," Violet replied. "Say what you feel, what you promise, what you hope for our future." Isaac took a deep breath and let the words flow, not planned but deeply meant. "Violet Naiche, I promise to honor you as my equal, to respect your wisdom and strength. I promise to provide for you to the best of my ability, to protect you with my life if necessary, but never to make you less than you are. I promise to listen when you speak, to value your counsel, to share in all joys and sorrows. I promise to love you faithfully, today and all my days, for as long as I draw breath." He drank from the bowl, the water sweet and cold, then held it for her. Tears shone in her eyes as she spoke her own vows. "Isaac Bradford, I promise to stand beside you as your partner, to share my knowledge and strength. I promise to care for you in sickness and in health, to be your companion in all things. I promise to trust you with my heart, though it is a frightened and battered thing, because you have shown yourself worthy of that trust. I promise to love you completely, to build a life with you, to walk beside you on whatever path lies ahead. From this day forward, your joy is my joy, your sorrow is my sorrow, and we are one." She drank, and then together they poured the remaining water onto the ground as an offering to the spirits. Violet spoke a prayer in Apache, asking for blessing and protection, thanking the ancestors for bringing them together. When she finished, Isaac pulled her close and kissed her deeply, sealing their vows with all the love and passion in his heart. "My wife," he murmured against her lips. "My partner, my everything." "My husband," she replied, the words still strange and new but also right. "My heart, my home." They spent their wedding day working on the cabin, which seemed appropriate to both of them. This was not a fantasy romance, but a real partnership being built stone by stone, log by log, promise by promise. But that evening, as darkness fell and they banked the fire and retired to their bed of pine boughs and blankets, they came together with a tenderness and passion that spoke of deep love and complete trust. Isaac was gentle, patient, letting Violet set the pace, and she responded with an openness that moved him deeply. They learned each other slowly, discovering what brought pleasure, what made the other gasp or sigh. When they finally joined together completely, it felt like a natural extension of everything else they had shared, another way of becoming one. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Violet said softly, "I never thought I could be this happy. I thought that part of my life was over, that I would spend my remaining years alone. Thank you for showing me I was wrong." "Thank you for saving me," Isaac replied. "Not just from the bullet wound, but from the life I was living, empty and without purpose. You gave me everything." As autumn progressed, their home took shape. The cabin was completed just as the first snow began to fall, tight and warm with its stone fireplace and sturdy door. They had laid in good stores of food, smoked and dried meat, wild onions and roots, berries preserved with honey Violet had dared to steal from a bee tree. They had furs for warmth and firewood stacked high against the cabin wall. More than the physical comfort, though, they had each other. The long winter evenings were spent in conversation, in learning, in simply being together. Isaac continued to learn Apache, becoming increasingly fluent, and Violet worked on her reading, using a battered Bible that had been among Isaac's few possessions to practice. They told each other stories, played simple games, made love with increasing confidence and joy. One night in deep winter, as wind howled around the cabin and snow piled high outside, they lay together talking about the future. "When spring comes," Isaac said, "I was thinking we might try to capture some wild horses. There is a herd that ranges through the valley below ours. If we could gentle a few, start breeding them, we might eventually have something to trade or sell." "That would be good," Violet agreed. "And I have been thinking about my brother Joseph. I know it is dangerous, but I want to try to find him to know if he lives." "Would you help me do that?" "Of course," Isaac said without hesitation. "He is your family, which makes him my family too. When the weather clears and travel is possible, we will find a way to get information about the Indian schools to track him down. I promise you that." Violet kissed him gratefully. "You are a good man, Isaac Bradford. I am lucky to have found you." "I am the lucky one," he insisted. "You gave me a life worth living." Spring arrived eventually, as it always does, the snow melting in rushing streams, the valley erupting in wildflowers and new green growth. Isaac and Violet emerged from their winter cocoon, finding their valley even more beautiful than before. The deer had returned in numbers, and sure enough, a herd of wild horses could be seen in the lower valley, grazing the new grass. They spent weeks working to capture horses, using techniques Isaac had learned in his years of ranch work combined with Violet's patient, gentle approach to animals. Eventually, they had 3 mares and a young stallion, all slowly being gentled to human touch and voice. It was satisfying work, seeing the wild creatures gradually come to trust them, and Isaac's dream of breeding horses began to seem possible. In early summer, they made a carefully planned journey to a small town in New Mexico territory, a place neither of them had been before, where they hoped to go unrecognized. Isaac did most of the talking while Violet stayed quiet, both of them aware of the danger but determined to gather information about Joseph. Through careful questioning and a few dollars spent in the right places, they learned that the Bureau of Indian Affairs kept records of children sent to schools. For another few dollars, a clerk was willing to check the records, and they learned that Joseph Naiche had been sent to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. had been there for 4 years, and according to the most recent notation, was still alive and in residence. Violet wept when she heard the news, relief and joy mingling with frustration. "Pennsylvania," she said. "That is so far on the other side of the country. How would we ever get there? And even if we could, would they let me see him? Would he even remember me? We will find a way," Isaac promised. "Maybe not this year, but we will save money, make plans. Someday we will go there and you will see your brother again. I swear it to you." As they rode back toward their hidden valley, Violet felt lighter than she had in years. Her brother lived. She had a husband who loved her, a home that was safe and beautiful, and a future that stretched before her full of possibility rather than just survival. The years that followed were filled with hard work and deep happiness. Their horse herd grew as the mares foaled, and they captured or traded for additional stock. Isaac proved to have an excellent eye for breeding, choosing stallions that would improve the herd's strength and temperament. They began to carefully sell horses to selected buyers, building a reputation for quality even while maintaining their privacy. Violet became known to a few trusted people as a skilled healer, and occasionally someone would make the difficult journey to their valley seeking help for injuries or illnesses that other remedies had failed to address. She charged little or nothing, accepting instead barter goods, information, or simply the knowledge that she was helping people. In their 3rd winter together, Violet discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. A child was a blessing they had dreamed of, but also a responsibility that felt enormous given their isolated existence. What if something goes wrong? Violet worried. "I've helped other women give birth, but doing it myself, with no one to help but you." "Then I will help as best I can," Isaac said firmly. "And you will be fine because you are the strongest person I know. We will face this as we face everything else together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Violet continued her work as much as possible, and Isaac became increasingly protective, insisting she rest more, doing extra work to spare her. She found it both annoying and endearing, his concern an expression of love she had never known she needed. On a warm day in late spring, as flowers bloomed throughout the valley, Violet went into labor. Isaac stayed with her through the long hours, following her instructions, bringing water and cloths, holding her hand when the pains came hard. When the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, their son was born, small and perfect and screaming with healthy lungs. "A boy," Violet said wonderingly, holding the infant against her chest. "We have a son, Isaac." Isaac was crying openly, overwhelmed by the tiny life they had created. "What should we call him?" "I was thinking we could name him Joseph," Violet said, "for my brother but also as a name of his own. Joseph Bradford Naiche, carrying both our families." "Joseph," Isaac repeated, testing it. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." As the baby nursed for the first time, they sat together in their cabin, now truly a family, and Isaac thought back to that day 3 years ago when he had lain dying in the dust. He had been so certain his life was over, had felt his blood soaking into the earth, and known he would leave nothing behind, no mark that he had existed. How wrong he had been. How impossible this happiness would have seemed then. "I love you," he said to Violet, not for the first time but with fresh awareness of the miracle she represented. "Thank you for saving me, for giving me this life." "We saved each other," Violet replied, looking up from their nursing son. "You gave me hope when I had none, a future when I thought I had only the past. I love you too, husband. Always." As baby Joseph grew into a toddler, the question of his education became increasingly important to both parents. They wanted him to know both his Apache heritage and the wider world he would have to navigate. Violet taught him the language and stories of her people, while Isaac taught him to read and work with the horses. They both stressed that he was a child of two worlds and should be proud of both. When Joseph was 3, Violet brought up the subject that had been on both their minds for years. "I want to go find my brother," she said. "I want Joseph to meet his uncle, and I want to do it while we are still young enough to make such a journey." They spent months planning and saving, arranging for trusted friends to watch their horses and home. Finally, in the spring after Joseph turned 4, they set out on the long journey to Pennsylvania. It took them weeks of careful travel, moving first to a town with a railroad, then buying tickets for the long train journey east. Joseph was fascinated by everything, and his open wonder helped his parents see the journey as an adventure rather than an ordeal. They stayed in small hotels when they could, camped when they could not, and slowly made their way across the vast country. Carlisle Industrial School was an imposing place, all brick buildings and manicured lawns, looking more like a prison than a school to Isaac's eyes. They were met with suspicion when they arrived asking about Joseph Naiche, but Violet's passionate insistence that she was his sister, combined with supporting details she provided about his childhood, eventually convinced a sympathetic teacher to check the records. "Joseph Naiche is here," the teacher, a young woman named Miss Edwards, said carefully. "But I should warn you, the school discourages family visits. The goal is assimilation, leaving behind old ways." "I am not asking permission," Violet said with quiet steel. "I am his sister. I have traveled thousands of miles. I will see him." Something in her tone must have convinced Miss Edwards, because after a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Wait here. I will bring him to you, but I can only give you a few minutes before someone in authority notices." They waited in an agony of suspense, Joseph fidgeting between them, picking up on his parents' tension. Then the door opened, and a young man entered, dressed in a stiff suit with his hair cut short in the white style. He looked uncertain, confused, until his eyes fell on Violet and went wide with shock. "Violet," he said in English, his Apache clearly rusty from years of disuse. "Is it really you, Joseph?" Violet rushed forward and embraced her brother fiercely, both of them crying. "Little brother, I have looked for you for so long. I thought I might never find you." Joseph Naiche was now 21, a man grown, taller than his sister but with the same eyes, the same high cheekbones. He pulled back to look at her, drinking in her face as though memorizing it. "I thought you were dead. They said all my family was gone. I am alive and I am here, and I have so much to tell you." Violet turned to pull Isaac and Joseph forward. "This is my husband, Isaac Bradford, and your nephew, Joseph, named for you." The reunion was too brief, Miss Edwards nervously watching the door, but in those stolen minutes, connections were made and information exchanged. Joseph told them he had only one more year at the school, that he planned to stay in the East and work in a factory, trying to make his way in the white world since he could not imagine returning to the reservation. "Come to us instead," Violet urged. "We have a home, a hidden valley where we raise horses. There is room for you, a place where you do not have to choose between being Apache and surviving in the white world. You can be both." Joseph looked torn, uncertain, but Isaac spoke up. "You do not have to decide today. But know that you have family, that you are welcome, that there is a place for you if you want it. We are in the White Mountains, Eastern Arizona Territory. Ask around for Isaac Bradford, the horse breeder. People will point you in the right direction." They had to leave before they were discovered, but Joseph promised he would write, would think about their offer. They exchanged a final embrace, and then Violet had to walk away from her brother again, though this time with hope rather than despair. The journey home felt lighter despite its length. Violet had seen Joseph alive and well, had planted seeds that might someday bring him back to family. Whatever happened, she knew where he was, knew he remembered her, knew he had survived. When they finally returned to their valley, everything was as they had left it, their friends having faithfully tended the horses and home. They settled back into their routine, but with fresh energy and purpose, waiting and hoping for word from Joseph. A year later, a letter arrived, carried by a trader who knew to look for them. Joseph wrote that he had finished at Carlisle and was coming west, that he wanted to see their valley and meet his family properly. He arrived late that summer, thin and wearing Eastern clothes but with joy in his eyes as he embraced Violet and met Isaac and young Joseph properly. "I tried living their way," he told them around the fire that first night. "I worked in their factories, lived in their tenements. But I was not happy. I kept thinking about what you said about being both things, about not having to choose. I want to try it if you will have me." "This will always be your home," Violet said firmly. "You are family." Joseph Naiche proved to be a natural horseman and quickly became invaluable to their operation. He and Isaac formed a strong friendship, and little Joseph adored his uncle, following him everywhere. The household expanded in other ways too, as 2 years later, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, for Isaac's mother, and 3 years after that, another son they called Daniel. Life in their hidden valley was not without challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, injuries and illnesses, the constant need to be vigilant about their safety. But they faced everything together, the family they had built from loss and courage and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Violet rode out alone to the spot by the stream where they had married, leaving the children with Joseph. They renewed their vows to each other, pouring water on the earth as they had done a decade before, speaking of the life they had built and the future they still dreamed of. "I remember when I found you in the dust," Violet said, holding his hands. "You were dying and I almost left you. But something told me to help, and that choice changed everything. It brought me you, brought me this life, brought me our children. I would make that choice again every day for the rest of my life." "I remember waking up and seeing your face," Isaac replied. "I was in so much pain, so lost, and there you were, this fierce, beautiful woman who saved me without knowing me. I fell in love with you in that moment, I think, though it took time to admit it. And when I finally could speak, you remember what I said." Violet smiled, recalling those early days. "You asked me to stay with you." "I said stay with me always," Isaac corrected. "It was fever talking, but it was also the deepest truth of my heart, and you did stay. You stayed, and you gave me everything I never knew I needed. You are my always, Violet Bradford. Today, tomorrow, and forever." They kissed as the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, and Violet thought about the journey they had traveled together. From that day in the dust to this moment of perfect happiness, they had faced danger and built joy, had lost everything and found each other. The years continued to pass, bringing both expected and unexpected blessings. Young Joseph grew into a fine horseman with his father's patience and his mother's intuition, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day work with the herd. Sarah developed her mother's healing gift, learning plants and remedies, becoming known throughout the region as a skilled helper. Daniel proved to have a way with mechanical things, always tinkering and improving their tools and equipment. Joseph, Violet's brother, eventually married a Navajo woman he met while trading horses, bringing Naomi into the family. They built their own cabin at the other end of the valley and had children of their own, expanding the family further. The hidden valley became a refuge for several other mixed families, people who did not quite fit anywhere else, but found acceptance and safety here. As Isaac and Violet grew older, their love only deepened, mellowing into something rich and comfortable without losing its essential passion. They could communicate with a glance, knew each other's thoughts and needs without speaking. They had weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, mourned losses together, and through it all, remained each other's anchor and joy. On a spring evening when Isaac was 50 and Violet was 48, they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset, their grandchildren playing in the meadow below. Isaac's shoulder, the one where the bullet had torn through so many years ago, ached in the cool evening air, a reminder of how they had come together. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, not for the first time. "The life we chose. You could have found your people, lived among the Apache again." "I found my people," Violet replied, as she always did. "They are here, this family we built. These children and grandchildren who carry both our bloodlines, who live in both worlds. This is where I belong, Isaac, with you. Always." "Always," he repeated, taking her hand. "Though I still cannot believe sometimes that you chose me. That day I woke up and you were there, tending my wounds. I thought you were an angel. I was not entirely wrong." Violet laughed, the sound still as beautiful to him as it had been when he first heard it. "I am no angel. Just a woman who found a good man and was smart enough to keep him." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, the evening growing cool around them. Inside the cabin, which had been expanded several times over the years, they could hear Sarah preparing the evening meal, could smell bread baking and stew simmering. Young Joseph's children were staying with them tonight, and the sound of childish laughter drifted through the open windows. This was the life they had built from nothing, from two people alone and wounded who had chosen to trust each other, to love each other, to face the world together. It had not been easy, and there had been times when danger threatened, when loss nearly broke them, when the weight of living between two worlds seemed too much to bear. But they had held on to each other, and made something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. "Tell me again," Isaac said softly. "Tell me the story of how we met." It was a ritual they observed sometimes, especially on quiet evenings like this, remembering and honoring the beginning of their journey together. "You were lying in the dust," Violet began, her voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. "Blood soaking into the earth, your face pale as death. I almost left you, but something made me stop, made me kneel beside you. You were burning with fever for days, calling out in your dreams, and I stayed beside you, cooling your face with water, changing your bandages, willing you to live. And when I finally woke," Isaac continued, picking up the familiar thread, "I saw you there and I thought I was dreaming. But the pain was real, and so were you. Your hands were gentle but sure, and your voice was stern when you told me to be still. You were a difficult patient," Violet said with mock severity, "always trying to do too much too soon. But you were also brave and kind, and you looked at me like I was a person, not just an Apache woman. That was rare. That was precious. And when you told me you were hiding," Isaac said, his voice growing serious, "when you trusted me with your story, I knew I wanted to be someone worthy of that trust. I wanted to be the person who would stand between you and harm, who would give you a reason to stop running." "You gave me more than that," Violet said. "You gave me a home, a family, a future. You gave me love when I thought I had nothing left to love with. You gave me everything, Isaac Bradford." "No," he corrected gently. "We gave each other everything. That is what makes this so perfect. We built this together, from nothing but determination and faith in each other." The evening deepened into night, and eventually they went inside to join their family for dinner. The table was crowded and loud. 3 generations gathered together, telling stories and teasing each other and simply being present. This was the legacy of that day in the dust, of the choice Violet had made to help a dying stranger, of the love that had grown between 2 wounded souls. When Isaac and Violet finally retired to their bed that night, they held each other close, and Isaac whispered the words he had spoken so many years ago, the words that had become their promise and their truth. "Stay with me always." "Always," Violet replied, kissing him softly. "Until the stars fall and the world ends. Always." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, in the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, living proof that love could triumph over loss, that hope could survive even in the darkest times, that 2 people who chose each other could build something beautiful that would endure for generations. Years later, when their grandchildren asked how Isaac and Violet had met, the story was told and retold, becoming part of family legend. The tale of the wounded cowboy and the Apache woman who saved him, of the love that grew in a hidden valley, of the family built from courage and faith. It became a story of hope, proof that even in the hardest times, even when the world seemed determined to keep people apart, love could find a way. Isaac and Violet lived long lives, long enough to see great-grandchildren born, long enough to watch their hidden valley become a small community of people who valued acceptance over prejudice, family over fear. They lived long enough to see some of the worst injustices of their time begin to change, though not nearly as much as they would have wished. They lived long enough to become the elders of their family, the matriarch and patriarch whose wisdom and love set the tone for everyone who came after. And when Isaac finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 71, with Violet beside him as she had been for nearly 50 years, his last words were a whispered "always," and hers were the same. She followed him 3 years later, ready to be reunited with the man who had been her heart, her home, her always. They were buried together on a hillside overlooking their valley, and on the simple marker their children placed there were carved these words: Isaac Bradford and Violet Naiche Bradford. They saved each other. They loved always. And in the valley below, their descendants continued the work they had begun, raising horses and children, healing hurts and building bridges, living lives that honored the courage of 2 people who had refused to let the world's hatred defeat them, who had chosen love in the face of fear, who had built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. Their story lived on, passed down through generations, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope endures, that love can bloom in unlikely places, that 2 people who choose each other, who commit to staying together through everything, can change not just their own lives but the lives of everyone who comes after. The hidden valley remained a refuge for many years, a place where people of different backgrounds could come together in peace. The horses Isaac bred became famous throughout the region for their intelligence and temperament. The healing knowledge Violet preserved was passed down through Sarah and her daughters, helping countless people. The family grew and prospered, spreading out across the West, but always maintaining ties to the valley where it had all begun. And sometimes, on quiet spring evenings when the sun set in shades of crimson and gold, people swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand through the meadow, a man and a woman who had found each other against all odds and built a love that transcended death itself. Whether it was imagination or something more, it served as a reminder of the power of love, of the strength found in partnership, of the beautiful things that can grow from the simple act of choosing to help another human being in need. The story of Isaac and Violet became more than just a family legend. It became a testament to the truth that love knows no boundaries of race or culture, that compassion and courage can overcome even the most difficult circumstances, that two people who commit to each other can build something that lasts far beyond their own lifetimes. And at the heart of it all were the words Isaac had spoken in his fever, the words that had become their promise and their truth, the words carved into their shared gravestone and into the hearts of all who came after. Stay with me always. Those words, spoken by a wounded cowboy to the Apache woman who tended his wounds in silence, became the foundation of a love story that would be remembered and retold for generations. A story that proved that even in the harsh reality of the Old West, with all its violence and injustice and pain, love could triumph, could heal, could create something beautiful and enduring that would stand as a testament to the best of what humanity could be. Their descendants spread across the country in the years that followed, but many remained in the hidden valley, maintaining the home Isaac and Violet had built, tending the horses their ancestors had bred, preserving the knowledge and traditions of both cultures. The valley became a symbol of what could be achieved when people refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose, when they chose love over fear, when they committed to building rather than destroying. Young Joseph Bradford, named for his uncle and the firstborn of Isaac and Violet's children, lived to be 83 and told the story of his parents to anyone who would listen. He spoke of his mother's strength and his father's gentleness, of the partnership they had modeled, of the love that had sustained them through decades of challenges. He made sure his own children understood the sacrifices their grandparents had made, the courage it had taken to build a life together in a world that did not want to accept them. Sarah Bradford became a renowned healer, her reputation spreading far beyond the valley. She treated people of all backgrounds, refusing payment from those who could not afford it, teaching anyone who wanted to learn. She spoke often of her mother's wisdom and skill, of the knowledge that had been passed down through generations of Apache women, of the importance of preserving that wisdom even as the world changed around them. Daniel Bradford used his mechanical gifts to bring improvements to the valley, installing windmills for water, improving their equipment, making life easier for everyone. He was also the family chronicler, writing down the stories and history so they would not be lost, ensuring that future generations would know where they came from and what their ancestors had overcome. Joseph Naiche, Violet's brother, lived long enough to see his own grandchildren grown. He often spoke of how finding his sister again had saved him, had given him back his identity and his place in the world. He told his children about the reservation years, about Carlisle, about the journey to find himself, always emphasizing that the greatest gift had been the family that took him in and gave him a home. The community that grew in and around the hidden valley became known as a place of tolerance and acceptance, drawing people who did not fit comfortably into the rigid categories of their time. Mixed blood families, couples who had married across racial lines, people escaping persecution for their beliefs or their heritage, all found refuge there. The example Isaac and Violet had set, of two people from different worlds building a life together based on mutual respect and love, inspired others to believe such a life was possible. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, and the worst of the Indian Wars passed into history, the family's story took on new significance. It became a reminder that the violence and hatred of those times had not been universal, that there had always been people who chose a different path, who saw humanity in others rather than just difference. It offered hope that healing was possible, that wounds both personal and collective could eventually scar over and stop hurting quite so much. The horses bred from Isaac's original stock became known throughout the West for their quality. People came from hundreds of miles away to buy Bradford horses, knowing they were getting animals that had been bred and trained with care and patience. The business prospered, providing stability for the family and employment for others, becoming a source of pride and independence. The hidden valley itself changed over time, becoming less hidden as the dangers that had made such isolation necessary gradually diminished. Roads were built, telegraph lines strung, and eventually the valley was no longer quite so removed from the wider world. But it retained its character as a place apart, a refuge and a home for those who valued what Isaac and Violet had built there. And through it all, the story of how it had begun was never forgotten. The story of Apache woman who tended his wounds in silence, of the cowboy who woke and whispered, "Stay with me always," of the love that grew between them and transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who came after. It was told at weddings and christenings, at funerals and family gatherings, always with the same message. That love is stronger than hate, that courage can overcome fear, that two people who choose each other can change the world. The legacy of Isaac and Violet Bradford lived on in the faces of their descendants, in the horses that bore their brand, in the community they had helped build, in the example they had set. It lived on in every act of kindness across cultural lines, in every partnership based on equality and respect, in every choice to build rather than destroy, to love rather than hate. And somewhere in that hidden valley in the White Mountains of Arizona, beneath a marker that read, "They saved each other," they loved always. Two souls rested together, their story complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure in the hearts and lives of all who had come after them. The end.